Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This is episode number 49 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. My name is Jason Romano, and as always, you can download and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, everywhere podcasts are found, and all of our content is found at sportsspectrum.com. And really, the best way to never miss an episode of this podcast is to go on your tablet or your iPhone or your device and just find the Sports Spectrum Podcast on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and just click that subscribe button. And when you click subscribe, it assures you that every single podcast we release just automatically shows up on your phone and it's ready to listen, ready to check it out. So real easy way, just click that subscribe button and never miss an episode, all 49 of them that we put out here on the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Today's guest is Geoff Blum. Now, he is a former Major League Baseball player, 14 seasons in the major leagues. He's currently the Houston Astros TV analyst. So we talk a lot in this episode about the Astros, especially in the beginning part of the interview and their run to the World Series. The World Series, this year's World Series starts Tuesday, October 24th. We're releasing this podcast on Monday afternoon, October 23rd. So we do a little bit of the World Series preview here, which is great. Geoff was also a 2005 World Series champion against the Astros when he was a member of the Chicago White Sox. Now, Geoff had one at-bat in that entire World Series. One. Guess what he did? He hit a game-winning home run in the 14th inning of Game 3 to help his White Sox take a 3-0 lead and eventually sweep the Astros and win that World Series 4-0. So Geoff Blum is sort of loved and hated in the city of Houston because he played for many years with the Astros. He also obviously is an analyst now calling the games for the Astros, but he hit a home run to beat the Astros on baseball's biggest stage, the World Series. But Geoff is also a believer in Christ, and I really think his testimony is something that's going to hit home for a lot of people listening, because he talks a lot about the dynamic of walking with the Lord and his wife not exactly on the same page as him as far as his faith goes, and how that sort of came together. And he has a very emotional story that he shares that I think you guys will really like and really enjoy listening. So without further ado, I'm going to take you right to this interview. 14-year Major League Baseball veteran, current Houston Astros TV analyst, and 2005 World Series champion and World Series hero. Here he is on the Sports Spectrum Podcast, Geoff Blum. Geoff, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
It's a fun time to be a fan of baseball, Geoff, and we appreciate you being on. And 14 years you played in the majors, including 2 stints with the Houston Astros, and you're doing TV work with them now on their broadcasts. And how much fun has it been this season, and even what's happening over the past couple of weeks in their ride to the World Series? How much fun has this been to watch and be a part of?
It's been an absolute blast. And, having been a player and gone through it as a player, now to sit back and be a part of a team that has been this successful and watch their ride, and have some of your premonitions about how good this team can be come to life has probably been the most fun. It's, you almost feel like a proud parent watching some of these guys. Not only are they so young, but they're so good, and they're great guys to be around. They've been very good and accommodating for everything we've needed on our telecasts. But again, just watching these guys day in, day out, how they go about their business, watching the ups and downs, and them literally enjoying their success so much is what's been so fun for me to watch.
It's funny when you watch a baseball team during the regular season, and there's been countless examples of teams that have won a ton of games during the regular season, and then you get to the playoffs and just somebody gets hot, one ball bounces the way it shouldn't, a pitch, whatever it is, and you just never know. That's why it's so difficult just even to get to a World Series. For the Astros, it was a tale, especially in the ALCS, of really three parts. They play well the first 2 games at home, but they win 2-1 in both of those games. They're really tight games. Then they go cold. They go to Yankee Stadium and the Yankee bats heat up. And now you're down 3-2, and the Astros come back to Houston, and they obviously win the last 2 games and win the American League pennant. Give us your thoughts just on what you saw. I thought this was really a fun and in a lot of ways a classic ALCS.
No, I think it was great. I'm actually glad it went 7 games, just in the sense that you can call it a classic. It was a great matchup against, the quote unquote evil empire of the New York Yankees. There was a lot of fanfare around these guys, calling them the baby bombers, and they were a very good team. It was interesting to watch the Astros in the American League Division Series because everybody anticipated them beating the Boston Red Sox like they did, but everybody anticipated them matching up against the American League's best in the Cleveland Indians. But it was the Yankees who came out of that division series to face the Astros. And what you're talking about as far as a team coming in hot, that was the New York Yankees. They had renewed life after winning that tough battle in the wild card and then beating the best team in the American League. So obviously they were playing well, but they also had the mentality that we just beat the American League best, and now we're going into Houston. And they had tremendous games. They had some guys step up. I thought Luis Severino's pitched great. Mm-hmm. Aaron Judge had a couple of big hits. But just the matchup itself, you're right. 2 games at home to start the series, not high scoring, very well pitched. And then they go to New York, and we saw and heard the Astros explain that the fans and the atmosphere really got to them and knocked them off their game until they got home to finish off the series.
You've been around this game a long time, Geoff. You ever seen anybody do what Verlander did in those 2 games in the ALCS, Justin Verlander?
No. They needed him to succeed. But not only did he succeed, but he absolutely dominated a very good hitting team in the New York Yankees. A complete game his first time out, and then shutting them down the rest of the way in that second outing was truly remarkable and very impressive at the same time.
That game too, Geoff, 120-plus pitches, complete game, keeping his team in the game to finish out the victory and the walk-off, a 2-1 win. That was a throwback type of game. You don't see that anymore in baseball, especially in the playoffs where they just ride a guy and let him go for an entire game, especially in a close game. I mean, the true definition of a workhorse. We don't see that anymore, do we?
No, he's an absolute throwback, and I think it's a lot of fun having a guy like that on our team just because our organization is young in a sense as far as our GMs and a lot of the scouts' philosophy, and they will protect these guys as far as innings pitched and number of pitches thrown. But if you read some of the interviews that Justin Verlander has given in the last week or two, he said that Nolan Ryan is his idol. That is one guy that he looked up to. So I think he already had that mentality coming into professional baseball that I'm not going to be the guy that I just hand the ball over. You're going to have to rip this thing out of my hands to get me off the mound.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun to see him go out and do that. You know, what's interesting to me, too, is that in him doing that, you can kind of see the reciprocal effect that it's having on other guys in the rotation where they don't want to come out.
We're talking to Geoff Blum here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. And let's talk about the World Series now. Geoff, you won a ring in 2005. We'll talk about that moment in a bit with the White Sox when you won in 2005. But this year's World Series, it really doesn't feature any really surprises. The Dodgers were the best team in the NL all season long. The Astros certainly one of the best all year in the AL. Game 1 opens up in Los Angeles Tuesday night. How do you see this one playing out?
Obviously I'm going to be a little bit biased and I can manipulate some of the storylines to back my narrative up. But I like the angle of a very good team playing in a city that is wholeheartedly behind their team, and a team playing for a city that they are intertwined. They have really become a part of the community, which has been very unique for me to watch. So just the celebration of them getting to the World Series means a lot, but now they have an opportunity to take it to that next step and bring home a world championship. It's going to be a dogfight because, like you said, these are 2 very good teams. And until September, when the Cleveland Indians went on that 22-game winning streak, which was miraculous in itself, the Houston Astros were the number 1 team in the American League.
Oh, yeah.
And I read something today. I don't know the number specifically, but I do know that it's been a while since we've seen a matchup between 2 100-win teams in each league. So I think it's kind of fascinating in that sense that you literally have played this thing this far, and you have arguably two of the best teams in Major League Baseball. The Astros, the only deficiency I really see in them is their bullpen, because I think the options might be a little more limited for A.J. Hinch, whereas the Dodgers, their bullpen has been shut down all through the American League Championship Series by not giving up a run. But the offenses, I think, are comparable. They're young. They're strike zone oriented, where they don't chase a lot of pitches. And then you've got Kershaw, Hill, Darvish, and Alex Wood, and then you've got Dallas Keuchel, Justin Verlander, Lance McCullers, and Charlie Morton, who pitched very well in Game 7. So the pitching is going to be fun to watch, but the bullpen edge goes to the Dodgers. But obviously, I'm going to pick the Astros in 7 games.
Now, I just need to ask you about one specific player, and we haven't mentioned his name yet. 5'6", Jose Altuve, probably the American League MVP. I'll be surprised if he doesn't get it, although Aaron Judge certainly had a fantastic season. I mentioned this with Verlander about you being around the game a long time and seeing a certain type of player in Verlander and what he did in the playoffs. But 5'6", like you're around this guy all the time. Like my wife is 5'6", and she looks at him and says, "Okay, I'm the same size as that guy. How is he doing that?" Tell me about Jose Altuve. Just give us a snapshot from somebody who's around this guy all year long on what type of player he is and how he does what he does at the sort of gifts that God has given him.
I really wish I could explain it, but there are things beyond our knowledge, and there are things that players have within them as far as talent, ability, and heart that, really you can't put words to. You just have to sit back and watch what these guys go out and do. And Altuve has consistently gone out there and done it because, there's Tony Gwynn's, there's Wade Boggs's, and, Ted, there's guys that you have conversations with where you understand what they're saying, but you can't put it to the test. Everything I heard from Tony Gwynn when I was in San Diego, I understood. But physically and mentally, I couldn't put the two together to make it happen. That's what separates these guys. Is internally there's something else that goes with the ability. And Jose Altuve definitely has it. There's a different motor inside. There's a different heartbeat. There's a different pace to the game to these guys where they can slow things down and understand what's happening almost before it happens and anticipate, what the pitcher's going to do or where that ball is going to take that hop so that they can make the great play or get the big hit. But Jose Altuve, I've been watching him for the last 5 years, and the thing that is remarkable to me, having been an ex-player and played with very good players, and now watching Jose Altuve by himself over the last 5 years, is he has gotten not just better each year, but he's gotten extremely better each year. He's gotten better defensively. We saw him with the high average win the batting title in 2015, and then he comes out in 2016, has a high batting average, and hits 24 home runs. Nobody saw that coming. And then he backed it up with the batting title this year, possible MVP, where I agree with you that he should win it, and more home runs. So I really wish I could put a word or put a phrase to what Jose Altuve is doing, but it's incredible. And the way he goes about and does it is probably what's even more impressive. Because he is one of the more humble and approachable guys I've been around in the game.
Well, he's going to be fascinating to watch in the World Series, and I'm excited just to see him and so many other guys on the Astros go for their first World Series. Now, your own World Series experience, I want to talk about that. Certainly quite memorable, and it's weird. It's got to be weird for you. And I when I was doing my research here, you know where I'm going with this, so I got to ask it because you're sort of loved and hated at the same time in Houston. So let me paint the picture. It's 2005. You're a member of the White Sox facing the then former team of yours, the Houston Astros. You get your only at bat in the entire World Series, and it happens to be in the 14th inning of a tie game in a pivotal Game 3 that, in a way, is an absolute must-win for Houston. The game is in Houston, October 25th, 2005. You come and you hit a go-ahead home run. So I have a couple questions just about this moment, first of all. But first, those who never experience a moment like that, one, that's kind of every kid dreams of this experience type thing. You hit a game-winning homer in the World Series, and it was your only at-bat in the entire World Series. What was that moment like? What comes to mind when I just bring that moment back to you?
No, well, first of all, I actually, in my post-game comments, said exactly what you said. I go, I've had this moment in my backyard playing with my brother, playing baseball, wiffle ball, because I grew up in the LA area, 1988. I remember Kirk Gibson hitting the home run.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's the situation you replayed as a kid. You didn't want to be the guy that went out there and got 3 hits in game 100. You wanted to be the guy that got the game-winning hit in a World Series game to make a difference. And, the fake roar and stuff like that, in your backyard is what I remember. But there's nothing the imagination can prepare you for when it actually happens. It was a unique situation, like you said, because I spent 2002, 2003 with the Houston Astros before being traded away to Tampa and getting released from Tampa, signing with San Diego. The birth of my triplets were in 2005, getting traded from San Diego to the Chicago White Sox, eventually getting onto the White Sox playoff roster, getting into the World Series, and then finding myself in a situation where I was given an opportunity and capitalized on it by putting my team ahead with a go-ahead home run in the longest game in World Series history. There were so many factors leading up to that point, and in that collision with my bat and the baseball that make it that much more special. Even talking about it right now, I'll get a little bit choked up about it because now that I'm done playing and I can understand and look back and really try and wrap my head around what that experience is like. It's crazy. It literally is crazy. It's every definition of madness happening all at once.
What did you get? Like, what did you take back from that? Do you have memorabilia from that moment? Do you have the ball?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have your uniform still? All that?
Yes. Yeah. No, you know what? It's crazy because it was the longest game in World Series history. I'm one of two players that had one at bat in the World Series and hit a game-winning home run. The Hall of Fame took my bat after the series was over. They
That's
took
awesome.
my base. Yeah, it is awesome. I have a lifetime pass to the Hall of Fame to go down and swing Babe Ruth's bat if I wanted to. I haven't taken advantage of that yet, but my bat is in the Hall of Fame. I have the jersey hanging on my wall as I speak to you right now in the office. My ring is in the house, very well hidden. I have, having played in Houston, I knew a lot of the security guards at the stadium. So when my home run ball came back to one of the security guards, he was actually kind enough to walk it over to me and hand it to me. And I have the home run baseball from that at bat. So I've got plenty of memories as far as physically, but also emotionally.
Now, here's the second part of this. So you just mentioned that you hit this home run against your former team, which you now work for and cover. So when you go to the ballpark in 2017, first of all, I'm sure there's got to be some sort of mixed emotions with the fans. They obviously love you because you played with Houston, but you crushed them in a lot of ways with that home run. So what is that like, that dynamic of that sort of love-hate relationship with the fans? How often do you hear about that?
I hear about it constantly. I literally cannot say 2005 on air without all of a sudden my Twitter account just getting absolutely just blasted with, I hate you, but I love you, and even walking the stands during these playoff games, we love you. We hope the Astros make it all the way. Can't believe you did that to us in 05, that kind of stuff. But I think it says a lot about the Houston fans because they have been gracious enough to allow me back into their hearts, so to speak, or into their living rooms, even after an event like that. I think a lot of the fans are very knowledgeable in Houston and understand that I was traded away. And that if any one of those Houston fans were in my shoes, they would have wanted to do the same thing. But the hardest part for me is not being overly proud of that moment. That's probably the toughest thing because I am extremely proud of the opportunity and the moment that I had. But at the same time, I really have to suppress it out of respect to these Houston fans.
I want to go inside the psyche of what it's like to prepare for a World Series back in 05. And it's funny, as I'm doing my research, and I remember that series, again, the White Sox and the Astros. And I went back and looked because you see 4-game sweep and you think, boring World Series, no big deal. Every game in that series was extremely close, especially if you go to 14 innings. I mean, that's just nerve-wracking right there, right? Take me inside the psyche of just playing. I mean, the tension and the pressure that must be mounting when there can't be a real relaxation type of thing happening as a player during those games.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you looking into that because I have this argument a lot with a lot of people, baseball historians, the baseball guys that are, seriously knowledgeable about the game. And I really don't feel that World Series gets talked about enough in the sense that it was extremely intense.
It was tight. Every game was tight.
It was tight. Well, to prove your point, or to give you a little more emphasis on the point, is that it was we swept in 4 games, but the run differential was only a +6.
Yeah.
So that tells you there was not a blowout in this game. There were lead changes left and right. Paul Konerko had to hit a grand slam just to tie a game up. So it wasn't as if we ran away with it and just bulldozed through the World Series. We had to have some seriously clutch hitting. We had to have pitchers step up in certain moments. Mark Burley had a win and a save in that series. He came back in game 14 or game 3 in the 14th inning to get the save. So, it literally took everybody in on each roster to go through that thing. It was incredible. But, the interesting thing about the World Series for me was that playing the game was actually a joyful experience, even with the pressure and understanding some of these situations. Both sides did a great job of handling the pressure. I don't remember too many errors. I don't remember too many bad base running errors. I don't remember, the fundamentals going out the window. I remember big plays, big hits, and that's a credit to both ball clubs. But that's when you get to that pinnacle and you understand that you are the only two teams left playing, there's not much else to focus on other than the game. And I think that's where the purity of baseball really came out for both ball clubs. And it was a blast to be in the World Series. And I've said it then, I'll say it for the rest of my life. It doesn't matter how I feel about a guy or how anybody else feels about me, but I wish, honest to God, I wish everybody had the opportunity to play in the World Series because it is such a joyous experience. And I know guys that have lost it will probably argue with me on that, but knowing that you're playing in the World Series is truly a blessing.
We're talking to Geoff Blum here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. He's the Houston Astros TV analyst, longtime Major League Baseball player. Now, Geoff, we are the intersection of sports and faith here on this podcast. So I want to talk about your faith in Christ a little bit for a moment. I want to talk about from the beginning standpoint, sort of where that walk with the Lord began, where the roots started taking shape, where the seeds were planted for you in your faith walk.
I was in church camp. I was 5 years older than my younger brother. So in the summers, my mom would take me up to Lake Arrowhead in Southern California, and I would spend the summers, for a week or two at a time in the mountains in Mount Baldy. And it was a church camp. I knew it was a church camp. They didn't ambush me and try and indoctrinate me in that sense.
Sure.
But I wanted to go, and it was kind of funny. I remember that my mom would just stop literally outside the place, and I would run in. I didn't bring any friends. I offered it, but I was usually on my own, and my mom would just open the door and I ran for it. We had some very good experiences up there, but the community and the atmosphere, and I would imagine the timing is what led to me really feeling that movement of the Lord through me and helping me understand that I am not alone on this planet. But obviously between then and now, the road winds a little bit and gets on that dirt road and gets a little bumpy at times. But that's when I really started to feel the Lord moving through me. And I knew he was with me even from that point on in my life, even though I veered a couple times.
I was going to ask you, what did that look like as your Major League Baseball career started to take shape? Where is God in your life during your career, maybe early on? Maybe even as recently as when you retired in 2012, 2013?
Well, as any selfish athlete, you go out there and you think that you're doing this all on your own. Some of these situations and the opportunities, I earned this. Looking back now, I understand that these opportunities were presented in front of me. And I think through my faith and through my understanding of working hard and playing selflessly in sometimes a selfish game helped me to progress. And I really think that helped me have a long career because I was not a superstar. I was a role player. And for whatever reason, I understood that early on and humbled myself and understood that I was a small piece of a large group. And I just think that's the faith in God and being and understanding that, it's not about being self-serving. It's about being a part of something and helping 24 other guys get to a point where we can achieve success. And I learned early on that, I had to play multiple positions. The hardest part for me in baseball was being in the clubhouse and being a believer because there are chaplains. There are Sundays where we have a 15-minute sermon right before a game. but still, there's 6 days in between Sundays, and there are some situations where it's uncomfortable, or it's taboo to talk about and say, are you walking the right walk? Should you be doing this? Should I be doing this? So I kind of kept it under wraps and kind of tried to lead by example and not really force on anybody. Everybody didn't know, nobody really wanted to be that Bible thumper, quote unquote, in the clubhouse. So I kind of kept to myself as far as my faith was concerned, unfortunately.
You say unfortunately. Is that something you regret?
Well, you know what? I broke in the league in '99, so I had a good 4 or 5 years, 6 years until I signed with the San Diego Padres in 2005. And up until that point, every Sunday had 4 to maybe 5, 6 guys in chapel. I signed with the San Diego Padres, and that was a story in itself of heavy duty prayer. The only reason I was in San Diego at that moment for those 3 years is because I sat at the edge of my oldest daughter's bed and prayed. I said, guide me, show me, where do you want me? And I was fortunate enough that the opportunity came to San Diego to be there because my family was there. I got to live at home. But the first day I showed up in chapel in spring training, 15 guys sat down. And that's where I kind of had that, kind of have that moment where you're looking around, you're going, okay. And you kind of look up a little, look towards the sky and go, okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Confirmation in some ways.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Now, was there a sort of a mentor or a veteran presence or even just a player in any of the particular clubhouses that you've been that was sort of an inspiration to you, or somebody you saw and you were like, all right, maybe I'm not as vocal about my faith, but that guy is, and I want to be more like him, or even maybe it was a chaplain or somebody, but is there somebody in the clubhouse over the years that sticks out that, was planting seeds that you kind of see now and you were like, yep, I saw what was going on then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Lance Berkman, hands down. I mean, that's an easy choice for me, but it's also interesting to know that I had a guy in my life ever since I was 5 years old, and Mike Sweeney, and his family who were very religious and very motivating in the faith sense, and very supportive in that also. So he's kind of, he's the pinnacle of the faith-based baseball player. But Lance Berkman for me was one of those guys that was really good at keeping me accountable. And we never really sat down and said, we are Christians, we are going to, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It was just kind of an unspoken truth and an unspoken understanding that we both knew that, the Lord and Jesus were at the forefront of what we were doing as far as baseball players, but also as family men too. He's the father of 4 girls. I'm the father of 4 girls. So there's a lot of similarities there. We both switch hit, but we had a connection early on. And the best thing about Lance was that he is fearless as far as keeping you accountable. I mean, I remember 2 or 3 times where he would just, in a very stern fatherly voice, look at me and he goes, "You need to stop." and I would be like, and I would just kind of look at him like, you want to bow up and kind of be like, "What are you talking about?" But at the same time, I'd bowed up and I'd go, "Man, he is so right, and it's so annoying right now." But he was very good. I enjoy being around Lance, and here I am back in Houston, right? Just a couple miles away from him.
Absolutely. We had Lance on the podcast a couple episodes back, and just what a great testimony and a great story and a great.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, just awesome how much he loves the Lord and how much he wants to just serve others and help others. So I want to ask you about. We were texting a little bit before our interview. I was just kind of doing a little pre-interview, try to learn more about you, Geoff, and I just mentioned about your faith, and you mentioned a time in November of 2012. So I want to go there for a minute because that's right around the time when your playing career is ending. And you said there was a time in November of 2012 that took place with your faith. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, it has to do with my wife. We got married in 2001, so our walk has really been together, and she's actually been the driving force. And it's interesting just because she knew that I was a Christian and was doing my best to walk in that line, whereas she wasn't a believer early on in our relationship. But there were, obviously moments throughout your relationship. There's moments throughout becoming a family. There's moments throughout our lifestyle and the career I have where she started to see it a little bit, and she actually got turned on to the Lord by when I got traded to Houston. and listening to Beth Moore with some of the team wives. So that I'm giving you the long version. I apologize.
It's a podcast. We got time.
So, thank goodness. There's no producer in my ears screaming, "Go to break."
Exactly.
But so her walk started to grow, and we actually started walking together. And her faith through, up until about 2012 was on par, if not stronger, with mine. And she was really the driving force. But in our family, as far as making decisions for our family, within our family, and our relationship that were preyed upon and prayed for hours and days upon in order to get where we are now. And we continue to pray. And the reason I responded so quickly with November 27th of 2012, yes, I got released that year in July 18th of that season. And I understood that my season was my career was at the end of it. But also our faith was extremely strong at the time, and we had done a lot of praying. Do I try and make another ball club? Am I done? What's our future? Where do I go from here? There were a lot of decisions to be made in that off season, but we continued to pray. And the one thing that kept coming back to us is we kept getting drawn to the church that we had locally in San Clemente. So we just continued to get into small groups, continued to pray, and we had a major connection with that church and the people and the foundation. The pastor, the community really just opened their arms for us. And wouldn't you know it, that, our pastor stands up, 2 Sundays prior and goes, "We're going to be doing baptisms in the middle of November in the Pacific Ocean, on November 27th. And within maybe 10 seconds after he says that, my wife is leaning over to me and going, "We should do that." And I mean, it wasn't a tough choice. Knowing that I got to walk in there and be baptized again with her is what makes it special. It's what makes it, not easy moving forward, but it makes it good moving forward because we are on a similar path and the same page together.
We're talking to Geoff Blum here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Thank you for sharing that, Geoff. I can truly hear the emotion and the feelings that you were going through during that time. And it's awesome and a great testimony to see what the Lord is doing with you and your family. And speaking of your family, you're also a father. You're a dad of 4, including triplets, 4 girls. Whew, I can't imagine 4 girls. So for you as a believer, as a dad, what does that look like in the dynamic of your home and raising 4 girls right now? I know what that's like raising 1, but what is it like raising 4?
A lot of prayer and good bottles of wine. I'm not afraid to admit it. No, but it's actually tested me as a man. It's tested me as a man of faith, because you are trying to guide and discipline with the theory that that the Bible and the Lord are leading us. And that's the reason we make decisions to discipline or not to discipline, or why we should do what we do, or how to handle situations. But it's been such an eye-opener for me over the last 13, 14 years. I still don't understand women, but I'm doing my best. And there's moments where I go, "Oh, that's why." Okay. Yeah. But my wife has kicked me out of the room because I say stupid things or I get too loud. And that's really what I'm understanding is, and I'm trying to get good at it. I'm not saying I have answers. I'm not saying this is the way it should be, but I'm learning. I'm very hard-headed, and my wife knows that. So she's very persistent and very good at communicating with me when, women, girls, the response to the male voice, I'm learning, and tone have a lot to do with how I can discipline or be more effective as a leader. And so I've really had to, I've had moments where I want to snap and scream and yell and use that depth of my voice to really get a point across, but I know that it's worthless. All it does is instill fear. And that's the last thing I want to do, is instill fear in my family. I want to let them know that I'm trying to guide with them, not just discipline them completely, So that's where a lot of the learning and a lot of the prayer and a lot of the faith come in.
And thank God for our wives, right?
Oh, dude, no doubt. Hey, I mean, that could be a podcast in itself.
Oh my gosh!
The time she's talking me back from the ledge, yeah.
It's so true, so true. We're talking to Geoff Blum here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Let's finish it out, Geoff, with some rapid fire, just some fun questions I'll throw your way. 5 questions. and we'll go as quickly as you want to answer them. So I'm just going to throw them out at you, and we'll have some fun. First
Okay.
question, rapid fire. Best pitcher that you ever faced?
Kevin Brown, hands down.
Why?
He was a menace on the mound. There's not nobody's instilled fear in me until that guy got on the mound, and I knew he was mad when he was on the mound. He threw 92 to 95 mile an hour running fastballs that I couldn't connect with, and once I finally did connect with one, he threw me 92 mile an hour split fingers that I couldn't get a bat on. So he was huge on the mound. He would breathe fire, I felt like, and he owned me.
Best player you ever played with?
That's where it gets tough because I played with two Hall of Famers in Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio. Lance Berkman was a phenomenal athlete. But there's a guy that's going to go in the Hall of Fame next year, Vladimir Guerrero. Yeah. I had the opportunity to play with him in the minor leagues and get to the big leagues with him. I've never seen anything like him.
Oh, Vladdy was awesome. And it came up with the Expos, right? They've now defunct Montreal Expos.
Yep, we were the originals, man. It was a blast.
Favorite stadium to play in?
Oh man, Dodger Stadium. I grew up watching games in Dodger Stadium. I grew up, watching the Dodger, Padres, Houston, back in that old school NL West division, and just the fact that I watched games there and I got to play there. That's what makes it so special for me. I just think it's a pure baseball field.
Outside of the World Series home run that you hit, because that's probably the easy answer, what was your favorite moment in your career?
That's a good question. There were a couple. I remember one of the more memorable times was when I was with the Padres, and I only had one career pinch hit home run in my career. I was a very good pinch hitter and made a career out of that, but I only had one pinch hit home run. It was in Dodger Stadium. And it was on the triplets' birthday, I believe, when they were about 3 or 4 years old. And that was special in itself. But in watching the replay after the game, Vin Scully knew it was the triplets' birthday and wished them a happy birthday.
Oh, how cool is that?
That was
great
very
Vin
cool.
Scully. Come on now.
He can't do anything wrong. I mean, he always exceeds what you think.
How about the worst moment of your career?
I was actually a freshman in high school, and I made the varsity baseball team, but wasn't playing. There were older guys, obviously, that were better than I was, but the third baseman in the quarterfinals of CIF out in California, which was a big tournament, very prestigious, and we were playing extremely good. He blows out. I think he hurt his ankle or his shoulder, and I have to start the semifinal game. And if we win the semifinal game, we get to Dodger Stadium and play the championship. It must have been the second or third inning. I had a ground ball go right through my legs, and we lost the game. Oh. That was bone crushing.
Well, if that's 1987, 88, sometime, looking at your age, we're about the same age. That's only a couple of years after what happened with the Red Sox and Bill Buckner. Did that kind of come to your mind?
Very similar.
Yes.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Now, we'll wrap it up with this. First of all, a go-to Bible verse or a go-to Bible story, something that you cling to in your faith that's kind of been with you for a while, something you lean into when you think of your relationship with the Lord.
Deuteronomy 31:6, and it's just the gist of it is that so there's a lot of pressure. I know Moses is leading the Israelites in I cannot remember the guy's name for the life of me, but it was the guy next in succession that was taking over for him. And he was just kind of, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to do this? What am I supposed to do? Moses is Moses, I can't fill those shoes kind of thing. And it was just Joshua. Thank you. Gosh, Joshua's, about to start his leadership and he is just questioning it. And the Lord just basically, the verse says, do not fear, I have gone before you. And that's the one thing that has always carried me is that, no matter how hard the situation is or how out of control things are, he is there with me and he's been there before me and he's the sovereign Lord. This has been mapped out. I've just got to keep my faith.
That's awesome. Last question, Geoff, and we asked this to all of our guests here on the podcast. So I'm curious to know what your answer might be sort of in the moment you are. But right now, where you are in your life, what has the Lord been teaching you during this time right now?
That being uncomfortable is where it's at.
Describe that. What do you mean?
Well, 7 months ago, I was in Southern California, living a quarter mile from the beach, and I was presented an opportunity here in the city of Houston to take my family out of what was a very comfortable situation and uproot them. And now here we are in Houston, and we're trying to develop a new community. We were very well established in our church. That was a tough decision for us to leave, but we really prayed over it and felt that this was an opportunity for us to spread the word and be encouraging to others. And the only way that we can grow is by being uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, you're being forced to move, you're being forced to act, and that's where we're at right now. And it hasn't been easy, but at the same time, when things aren't easy, we know who we go to, and we go to the Lord.
Geoff Blum, thank you so much for being here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. It's been a treat to hear your story and get to know you a little bit, and hopefully we'll have you back again sometime.
No, I would love it. I really appreciate the opportunity, and keep up the good work, man.
And we do appreciate 14-year Major League Baseball veteran, current Houston Astros TV analyst, and 2005 World Series champion and 2005 World Series hero, Geoff Blum, for being a guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You can follow Geoff on social media. He's on Twitter and he's on Instagram, and he's very active on both right now, at Blummer27. So it's BLUMMER 27. And let him know that you heard his story here on the podcast. Let him know what you think of his story, what you think of his prediction, the Houston Astros in 7 games in the World Series over the Los Angeles Dodgers, and just give him a shout out. Let him know that you heard his faith story as well, which was a really encouraging story to hear. For sure. Also, my Major League Baseball World Series prediction, just to put it on record, I do agree with Geoff. I think the Astros win this World Series. I think it's going to be in 5 games, actually. I think they take 1 in L.A. Games 1 and 2 are in Los Angeles. I think they take 1 in L.A., and then I think they sweep at home in the 3 games in Houston, and I think they win this World Series in 5 games. I think they got the momentum now. I think the Dodgers had to sit around and wait a little bit. Houston's raring to go. Their bats are hot. Their pitching is really, really good, and I think they're going to take this World Series in 5 games. Let us know what you think about this World Series or anything else that has to do with the podcast, any guest ideas you might have. You can reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum. You can tweet directly at me at Jason Romano. You can also follow our Instagram page, which we've really been trying to improve upon and put some really cool images up there and some quotes and stuff like that. So check out Instagram at Sports Spectrum as well. And as always, leave a review on iTunes if you could. Let us know what you think of the podcast, and let us know, like I said, any guest ideas or any thoughts you might have on future podcasts. And as always, we thank you, and we do appreciate you for listening to the Sports Spectrum podcast, and look forward to talking to you and seeing you next time right here on Sports Spectrum.